Yeah, I want to totally. There we go. There
Hey.
we go.
Uh,
But
uh,
yeah, I want to
okay.
basically overhaul this setup. It'll be helpful for doing this just in general, but also because what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna repurpose these. I'm
Mm-hmm.
gonna build like a frame that I can mount like cameras and lights to it.
Mm.
So and microphones and
Yeah,
stuff.
groovy.
I'm pretty excited about it. Again, another thing that costs kind of a bunch of money. But I was like, I should do it. It's kind of like anytime I've done, because I think it'll help motivate me to be much more on task too.
Mm.
Kind of like times where I've started like sketch blogs.
Yeah.
It like gave me, though that didn't cost any money, but it definitely was something that gave me motivation to like draw all the time.
Yeah.
So, but also it's like as well because also I haven't done it in a bit, but I need to start posting Instagram and TikTok and stuff, and it'll be very useful for that too.
Mm.
I don't know. Well, I don't know if anybody's watching right
That's okay. Not yet.
now. Not yet.
Well, um,
Didn't start anyway.
yeah, so, first off,
If
how's
anybody
about,
comes in, we can tell them to go back to the beginning of the stream and listen at 2 times speed.
yeah, very important. Let's hope all
Tea's
this
probably
water's not gone.
there's probably something in there. Have our own little tea ceremony.
Yeah, so this is oolong.
Whatever
This
that
one's,
means.
yeah, whatever. It's the degree of oxidation before black tea. I don't even understand that yet, considering how much I think tea is neat. Um, I don't like understand what the oxidation means versus like fermentation, because some teas are fermented,
Mm-hmm.
but like, yeah,
Some are not.
yeah, green tea is not oxidized at all. Then it goes yellow, white, oolong, black.
Hmm.
And yeah, yeah, smell it. This is something we,
Hmm.
yeah, something I didn't think of until Madeline got me this set.
Mm-hmm.
Is I was like, oh, I can like sit here and smell this.
Mm-hmm.
It's so nice. Whoops. See if I cause.
I need a better setup.
I like it. It adds danger every time.
It's like a hot plate and a hot kettle.
Yeah. So
Oh, there we
this
go.
lovely oolong tea. Yeah, it smells. When I looked up kind of the common flavor profile, it's like Moscato or something. It's like a way of describing a flavor like a grape. So if next time you smell it, it has like
I
almost
could I
like a
could see that.
grapey fruitiness to it. Although sometimes I don't like to think of things like that.
Or you yeah,
I like to be like this tea smells like tea, not like everything but tea.
I mean, I guess it's kind of the one way of describing it.
Yeah.
Like it almost smelling it almost smells like raisins or something.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
But it's not. It's like clearly something else, but that's the closest scent I can think of. Hello, we have one person. Hmm.
so today we're going to talk about the Book of Tea, which is a delightful little book. Super awesome.
It's
By
all.
Kakuzo Okakura.
Hmm.
It's very short and it's absolutely jam-packed with all sorts of great stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of my absolute favorites.
Mm.
Yet another book from yet another book from Japan because I don't have my own culture, I guess.
When did you write it?
It's kind of old, right? The way
I actually don't.
it has like an old feel to it, like
It
because
does.
he's the way he like talks about.
He talks about like silk hats and stuff,
It says copyright 1989,
but that's probably one that.
but I'm not seeing like the original. It has to be older than that though. I mean, I guess it doesn't have to be, but
The
no, 1906. I knew it.
that sounds about right.
Yeah, 19. Yeah, it has like a
Because like some of the stuff he talks about when he talks about uh, Japanese people adopting Western cultural affectations, um, he the stuff he talks about is like this sounds pretty old,
yeah,
like older than In Praise of Shadows was,
yeah.
but not by too much. In Praise of Shadows was probably what like 15 years later or
Yeah.
something. Because he's like all talking, complaining about electricity. He doesn't like mention it at all.
Yeah, it's
His is like complaining about top hats and ballrooms, dances, throwing away flowers and stuff. So, yeah, it's definitely a different, slightly different era. It's like maybe kind of the generation before Tanizaki.
for how old it is. It's still probably like I mean, I've this is an area of my interest. Um and can't think of anything kind of like better.
Hmm.
Like this is like one of the better books, not just about tea, but like in the Taoism Zen chapter, it's one of the best like short explanations of it
Mm-hmm.
that I've ever read. Like it's so like clear and concise.
Yeah,
Like it's better than whole other books.
whole books that try to explain it.
Yeah.
And he's just like,
Cuz those are two like kind of like cagey philosophies that don't want to be explained real bad.
well, yeah, where he's just like, was it the one where he tells the story, or not story, but where he's basically describes it as if you were to explain it to like your average person, they'd probably laugh at you, and
Yeah.
that's exactly how it should be.
Yeah,
And it
that's
like
the
tells you a lot from just like a simple thing. It doesn't necessarily tell you exactly what it is, but it gets you like a good like feel for it. And then also just things like explaining like the tea ceremony and the idea of teaism and like everything around that, and then just saying that's basically Taoism.
mhm.
It's just manifested in sort of a secular ceremony. So it just makes it very interesting. And
Yeah.
it's like I don't even know if that's necessarily like the intention even. I mean, it kind of is, but it's almost secondary to just kind of going into tea ceremony stuff. Maybe that is the point. I don't know.
Yeah.
It
It
feels very like, oh, by the way, this is very Tao.
yeah, it's cuz um I think the tea ceremonies grew like naturally out of the philosophy.
Yeah.
It's just sort of like a natural growth in the culture, like a cultural expression.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
But yeah, so the Book of Tea. I don't we were talking about how to go about it, but I guess should we just
I mean,
discuss random parts of it that we
yes,
like? What there's
I
it's
guess. I mean, we could skip over the history, but
yeah,
the beginning's basically a history of how tea came to be in Japan and all the different sects of Buddhism or whatever that did whatever with the tea,
yeah,
which is really interesting, but it's also not the main thing that either of us were as interested in by the whole thing.
yeah.
Because most of the chapters of the book are actually about the different kind of elements that adorn the whole tea ceremony process. And it's really interesting what he has to say about those things in and of themselves. So he has a section on art, like the appreciation of art. He has a section on flowers, just like one on kind of the philosophy of it. So I can't remember what all the sections were,
Well, yeah,
but
section
each chapter is kind of a
yeah,
something.
he goes through just like all the different things that play in a tea ceremony. Um, yeah, we could
He also talks about architecture a bit.
yeah, which actually we could jump in. I don't know. Do you want to talk about the art segment if that's fresh in our brains, or the one right before it is the tea room,
Mm,
and that's kind of the first one. That's where he starts talking about like the ceremony proper.
yeah, we could talk about tea room. I mean, we talk a lot about architecture stuff, so I think that
That's
could be a
true.
good starting spot.
And this section's kind of fresh in my brain because it stood out for me the first time, for the first time reading it. This has been one every time I kind of like, oh, that's neat. That's kind of what all the elements are.
Mm-hmm.
Because he explains, uh, he explains that you would go if you were to go, you'd go and there's like a little like waiting pavilion, and beyond there, or beyond that, a nice winding path through a beautiful garden, the point of which to kind of take your mind off the world, kind of get you in the mood,
Mm-hmm.
and then the little hut, which is where you would have a tea ceremony. And the little hut is very plain, and you'd go in through a door that is too small so that you would be humble
Mm-hmm.
and sit in there for a second, and then the tea master would serve you some tea in a very um pared back, simple, minimalist setting where there's only I mean this is where we could here's interesting thing.
Mm-hmm.
Uh his critique of Western the way we decorate.
Oh, right, that's a good
He's
one.
pretty like gloves on, like no holds bar with this. Like he's like the way you make your houses into museums is stupid.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, how can you guys even think straight? Like
Yeah,
hanging pictures everywhere.
yeah. No, it's just very just come just pointing out like yeah, having everything out. Because, yeah, with the tea ceremony and kind of in traditional Japanese homes, it would have been, yeah, you have a spot where the art goes and you switch it out. You know, you have like little alcoves that are like little art corners where you might also put like a flower or something. And so, also, I think is funny. I mean, it's not, I mean, I guess it's kind of a thing still is the idea of having a portrait of yourself,
Oh yeah.
kind of pointing out how silly that is. And it honestly it is. People do it though. I mean, in a way, people still do that, I guess. Um, but yeah, he has a lot of interesting things to say about that for sure. Cause yeah, the plainness of it, and I can't remember. Again, I don't have. You have the book. I don't have the book, and I don't
Yeah.
remember what page it's on because I listened to
I know. Well, I
it.
listen.
But the way he describes the tea is basically like dignified poverty or
Yes.
something like that. Where it's like the point of it is sort of that state of impoverishment that is it's like the point is to be in like this humble setting regardless of who you are sort of a deal, hence like the short door and the plainness of it. And like there's also things like the woods used for like the framing and stuff are specifically chosen to be like kind of clashing and stuff. Like they use like different types of wood for different posts and whatnot, which is interesting.
Yeah, because it's just supposed to look like a little like cottage in the woods, essentially.
Yeah. It's like purposely imperfect. I don't. I mean, this is just like the image we have on there is kind of. It kind of shows that this is probably bigger than an actual old school tea house, but this was just an image I found on. This looks like it's in like a old school like mansion or
That
palace
actually
or
might
something.
be. He talks about tea rooms, which was like the precursor. That might be what this is.
Yeah, it's not really a
Where,
tea house.
yeah.
Like it'd be like a individual room, but there's there's other images. This was just a more interesting one because there's stuff like there's like little like shelf things that have a particular like way that they need to be made
Mm-hmm.
because it's like purposely made to be feel imperfect, but everything in it is actually very exactly considered. Like there's nothing like that whoever built it didn't plan to be there. But it's also built to yeah, be a little bit rustic feeling and but they also keep it immaculately clean. So it's like everything about it is considered.
It's like an interesting, um, it's like an interesting consideration on like an artistic attitude overall.
Mhm.
Because I guess you could say like you're creating something and you want it to have a really specific effect on people and you're really like curating it perfectly or like, to like the minutest detail.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the whole kind of running theme of the whole book, but also around the tea ceremony itself is all about um, considering the moment and preparing yourself for it and being in it. And that involves a lot of just consideration on the part of the tea master, but also the tea drinkers, the guests. So it's not just yeah. The image on the stream is the one we're talking about. I that's just the one I grabbed off like Google or something
Yeah,
like a month ago.
that's like a
I should have gathered together a few more things, but
yeah, that's like a partitioned room
yeah.
in a house dedicated to tea, which is in the book he says that's like the way they did it before they decided to have a little tea house
Mm-hmm.
in the back garden, but it's probably still I bet this is still probably pretty common because not everyone can have like
A tea
a
house.
tea house.
Well, I think the tea house would have been
There
almost like
goes your
a.
Donald Duck ring. Philip has a super cool ring.
I'll show you sometime.
Yeah, it's weird because it looks really cool from when you see it, you don't understand what it is when you see it on his hand or he set it on the table, but it looks like an abstract shape and it's actually pretty cool looking. Like it's like lovely. And then it's a Donald Duck. It's Donald Duck. um
What were we saying?
oh yeah.
But everything about it is considered.
Yeah, so it's the house. Let's see if I can remember. I didn't what stuck out to me. He says there's a couple different names or it's the same name in Japanese, but it means a couple different things. It's the House of Fancy. And let's see if I can. Oh, what am I talking about? I
You
have the
have the book.
book. I'm like, I better remember this. I committed it to memory. Do 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 do. Except for now, I have to find it.
So
Um,
well, I guess you have the library book.
yeah, but it's the House of Fancy because it's an ephemeral structure dedicated to a poetic idea. Let's see how close I got.
Ah,
Okay, the term, but that I thought that was super lovely. I like, I like thought about that for a while.
no, that's really good. Cause
Um,
yeah, it's everything's around this like temporary moment that is where the season is considered, the guests are considered, the everything.
yeah,
Like the art pieces to be admired are considered. And it's not something that's just there permanently. It's something that a select few people experience and then it's done. And everybody prepares themselves for it.
which is I think one of the things we'd probably like to talk about the uh this like interesting idea of preparing ones for art because man, that's certainly nothing we do. But real quick, I like the various explanations of the name. So the abode of fancy implies a structure created to meet some individual artistic requirement. And that's another kind of little theme throughout the book, which is interesting, is sort of like the tea ceremony is super individualistic. Like he says, or the tea hut is made for the tea master, not the tea master for the hut. Like it's like a very individualistic expression.
Yeah.
Um, but oh hey, that's the next line.
There you
The
go.
tea master room is made for the tea master, not the tea master for the hut. It's not intended for posterity, and therefore is ephemeral. Let's see if I can find my little quote that I liked. Um, tea room should be built to suit some individualistic taste is an enforcement of the principle of vitality of art. Art to be fully appreciated, you must be true to contemporaneous life. That's an interesting idea. He says it a couple times in a couple different places where he's like, we can sure appreciate the past, but uh, like, no need to get too worked up about like whether stuff is like classical or whatever.
Yeah.
But where's my? Oh yeah, there's just so much in this. I'm like glazing over all these lines, and I'm like, oh, I want to talk about that. I want to talk about that.
You just pick something.
But I'm just trying to find the. I think I quoted it pretty good. It's an ephemeral structure meant to house like a poetic impulse. Um, then there's the abode of vacancy. Uh, the tea room is absolutely empty except for what may be placed there temporarily to satisfy some aesthetic mood.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, like you switch out the art, you bring specific things, like if your tea ceremony is fall themed, I guess. You know,
Yeah.
so because I know that seasons are a big deal.
Yeah, it's a huge, huge, huge part of it. And in just,
One cannot listen to different pieces of music at the same time. A real comprehension of the beautiful being possible only through the concentration upon some central motive. Uh, and then the last one is the abode of the unsymmetrical.
mm
Just because, I mean, I think that one's pretty. They're just like they don't like things to be symmetrical.
yeah. I mean, that's part of like the design of the tea room,
Yeah,
which, I mean, that one's more or less symmetrical. Though there's parts of it that aren't. Now you can see like the way they have like a post on that side, not on the other side. They have so even on that, there's elements of unevenness versus the rest of the house. But yeah, if you look up images of actual like tea interiors, they're like they're not like a perfectly even space. I mean, they're like a square shape or whatever, but
yeah. You could contrast that to like a really symmetrical, um, architecture, like Greek architecture or something,
yeah,
and you can kind of see like the different philosophies at work, like the
hmm
cultural philosophies.
yeah, for sure. Well, it's he, yeah, he even talks about that with architecture to some extent, talking about like European stonework
Yeah,
versus Japanese woodwork. But yeah,
yeah, because I guess they were packing up and moving all the time,
yeah.
just moving their
Well, that was
just
interesting when he goes into the whole thing talking about the tradition of, when a couple gets married, they should have a new home, and that
when you die.
when you die, your home is demolished, and then new ones are made when new families are made.
That yeah, that's
It
super
was a
interesting.
very interesting. I didn't know that that was a thing, but I wonder how much of that like still like has some sort of.
Probably not much.
Oh, it might. I don't know. Because I know, um,
You can't imagine their.
Because I know in Tokyo they'll tear down buildings and rebuild new ones all the time.
Interesting.
Like they'll do that a lot. Um,
Well, then maybe.
it's probably just different because also there's no zoning in Tokyo. So like if a business dies, it might just get demolished. And it's like, well, somebody wants to put a house there. Then if that person dies, it's like, well, put something else there. I don't know. I'm I I mean I'm sure it's not like the same as like an enforced tradition, but I'm sure there's some sort of like lingering residue of like a mentality
Yeah.
around like living spaces that exists from something that's just been such a long-standing element. I don't know. I think things like that do, even if it becomes like not really a formal part of culture, I think it usually still like has some form that it carries on through.
Mm-hmm. Ooh. That again. That'll just happen to me every single time. I'll just get scalded by steam. Uh.
Uh, what else?
Yeah. So if you were to go, um, just in case somebody were to listen to this without, how it goes is you you wait outside in like a little like receiving area, you walk through the garden, everyone goes in, sits quietly, uh the tea master comes out and prepares tea. And something he doesn't talk about a whole lot in this book, but that I've gotten from other books is, oh man, the training for that is so rigorous.
Yeah.
Like, and they're like, there's a very specific and again very like minimal way that they're supposed to like move with like the absolute like minimum number of movements, and I think their actions. Cause you can watch people do tea ceremonies on YouTube, and you'll see they're like curt in their movements.
Uh huh.
They're very like they're kind of like quick. It's the movements are like sharp,
Hmm.
and they're still like graceful though.
Yeah.
It's like graceful, but it's like minimal, which I guess is the point of everything here.
Yeah.
Um, but it's very interesting to watch. Sorry, I just left the teapot on the ground. We need like a something for that.
Something.
Something to because that lid is very hot.
Good now.
It's, I wouldn't risk touching it. Uh,
Mm. Right.
okay. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. We could talk about the beauty chapter or the art chapter.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's. I mean, there's so much in the art chapter,
I know.
but I mean, so
It's
part
such a dense book.
yeah for how little it is. I mean, that's what I like about these two books we've gone over. They're so like dense and
Yeah.
short. You're not like spending a ton of time going through it, but you can like reread them, and each time you reread it, you get more out of it. But yeah, part of the tea ceremony is that one, you're setting a mood by, like a bunch of things. But part of it is like you'll have like a flower arrangement, you'll have like the kind of like ceramics that you're using or whatever to serve it. But then also you have like you'll have like art pieces or like art objects to like admire while everybody drinks tea. And the whole point of it is that you're creating this, yeah, ephemeral moment of feeling. And the art object is a kind of a important aspect of that. And in the book, he goes into more than just talking about art within the context of the tea ceremony, but just in general, what sort of attitudes one should have about art and what kind of it is. I mean, you mentioned a little bit like I think you read that part where he's like art is contemporaneous or whatever. It's part of like a context and a place and time and all that. Like it has a place. I don't remember exactly what the but um one of the big things that he makes a point about is um considering yourself when you go to appreciate a piece of art. So part of it is just like preparing yourself mentally but also physically for it, which is an interesting concept.
Kind of a foreign idea. When I say foreign, I mean like not one that we're used to.
Yeah, like if you like to him the idea of like going to an art museum just wearing like a jeans and a t-shirt would be unacceptable. He has a line where he basically says, "How can you go to be to like basically like stand before something beautiful if you yourself haven't become beautiful?" You know, so it's an interesting idea that this thing that is beautiful that somebody spent the time to create this object of beauty. It's like you're kind of disrespecting it by not being beautiful yourself.
Yeah, he also talks about that you got to watch out to not have your art become archaeology.
Oh, yeah.
So,
That
like, I feel like the entire way we think of art museums would be, I think that's what he's complaining about.
oh yeah, it I mean that's literally what he's complaining about. He has a whole section where he's basically complaining that art and archaeology have been like confused together where they're almost like seen as synonymous.
Yeah.
And he's just like doesn't think that that's appropriate at all. So like the idea of just like an art museum is strange from his like perspective where he's like why would you just have a place where you just catalog all these pieces of art?
Oh, the teapot is very loud right now.
It is very loud.
What is that?
Huh. Oh, she just asked that
Oh.
a little while ago. She's asking like
I
if
just saw.
the
I,
picture was what we were talking about, or if the room we're in is what we were talking
no,
about.
I thought the yellow was something. And I was like, why is that
Oh
highlighted?
no, that's just the
S-
name of the channel.
So here's story time to illustrate. I saw that the BYU Museum of Art was having a gala, and it was a free date for me and my wife. I was like, "Oh, free date.
Yeah.
Sounds like fun. You get to dress up."
Mhm.
And so, we dropped the kids off with grandma and we went to this gala. It was probably attended by every single kid at BYU.
Uh-huh.
So it was like shoulder to shoulder, which immediately I wanted to leave. Just
Yeah.
they had like a band playing. It was to open a new exhibit.
Uh-huh.
So they had a band playing like, you know, oldies rock cover really loud, and the place was absolutely packed. And we go into the exhibit, and it took about 5 minutes before I was like, we got to get out of here because this is the absolute worst way
To
to like. I couldn't think straight.
yeah.
So we went back on a Tuesday when
Yeah.
it was empty, and we looked at the new exhibit. But even then, I have had kind of, we've talked about this, I think. I've had this sort of like long-standing trouble with museums in that you feel like you have to like scamper through it and look at each piece.
Mhm.
And again, you're kind of like you're appreciating it for beauty, but you're also like appreciating it archaeologically. You're like, "Oh, wow." You're like that they sure made a cool looking pot in the year 700.
Yeah.
Um
No, there's definitely a part of it that kind of becomes that. And again, I don't know. I mean, I know when I go to an art museum, I spend a lot of time mostly just thinking about how whatever it is was made. Like generally I'm thinking way more like technically,
mhm.
thinking about like thinking about that. Um but I don't know. I don't know like somebody that's because I'm an artist and I go to art museums with like my dad and stuff who is also an artist. And so like I'm thinking more about that, like admiring like composition. But, how does like your average just person experience it? I don't know. Is
I don't
it more
know.
archaeological? Because I think way more about like, oh, this was a really cool technique with this oil painting.
Yeah.
I kind of want to do oil painting now. Or this was a really cool watercolor
I
piece.
think I mean,
But I don't know.
I think I could be
Because it's a little bit
I
of
don't want
both
to yeah, I don't
when
even want to
I'm
say that
gonna.
I'm even that cool. So let's say I'm just an average museum goer. I think you basically just walk through and you say, "That's neat. That's neat. That's neat. That's neat." Because
Yeah.
that's kind of how it goes. Like I can give myself a little credit and say maybe I can like appreciate some stuff, but I think you're just like that's neat, that's neat. I think what like if I were to illustrate what Kakuzo Okakura would want if in an art museum is he would almost want you to go in a room and that room has like I mean like a tea room, but like say it's an art museum. It has like one beautiful painting and you would like sit on the bench and just be with that painting.
Yeah.
And that's like what the point would be.
I mean, his ideal thing would probably just you'd have a tea ceremony
Yeah.
and the painting would be there. But yeah, like if you were to have a something like an art museum, you just have a bunch of different rooms where you just be isolated with a piece.
Yeah. And
Or well, I don't know.
maybe not
You
isolated even. Like
nah, but you would have like it would be way more constrained because it'd be similar in a way where it'd be curated, right? Because I mean that's how it is anyway. But I think there would be a lot less like mix and matching things. It'd be like this is this artist's stuff only. We're not putting other artists with them.
yeah.
Well, I don't know. I don't know. It's hard to speculate on what somebody from 100 years ago would
Yeah,
think.
I mean
But
that was just my
but
thought
but
given.
I think the main thing would be it wouldn't be like permanent. Like you wouldn't have a permanent gallery of things. Like the idea of the Louvre having this like the Mona Lisa hanging out for all of eternity would he'd be like, why? Like you shouldn't just like have it there as like a piece of like no different than if you had like a oh that might fall on that little thing. Um like you would have like a suit of armor or something in a history museum.
Yeah.
Careful. Um cuz it's like suddenly it's not almost like not art because you're just leaving it there.
Yeah.
I don't know because again, it's like so much of it to him. Art is kind of an ephemeral thing. It has like its time and place for any given particular thing, but then having it just like exist permanently in a place is kind of weird.
Yeah. And I mean, I have like 10 thoughts based on what you just said. Like, it's also a little weird to have things like back, it's like archaeological to have things like that related to each other only by like time and
Mm-hmm.
like next to each other. And it's sort of like, if it almost feels like your like mood gets jerked around in an art museum.
Uh-huh.
Um, and
Well, what does he say? He says something about that. I can't remember, but is basically we spend too much time like categorizing things.
yeah,
It's like we categorize, but we don't like appreciate it. We don't like actually admire the work. Instead, we're worried too much about like, hey, is this thing Baroque or is it Rococo? It's like, who cares? Just like appreciate the art, sort of a thing. Like that's actually like the wrong way to be thinking about art. You shouldn't be thinking about like, what was the era about this? It's like you should be thinking like, how does this make me feel? Like
hmm,
what is it? How does this connect with me?
like right
Or
now.
yeah, or does it at all?
Yeah,
Instead of, I can see this was painted in 1953 by so and so and whatever. It's like, does that like again archaeological information about it matter? Is that what you should be thinking about? And I mean, his argument is no, you shouldn't be thinking about that. Like, really, like the art that might be an element of something to appreciate about it, but it's like really fundamentally, it's the thinking about your connection with it. Like again, he explains it better.
yeah. Let me see if I can find. Um, let's see. Art, art, art. Uh, so another important aspect is the talking about uh um like letting the almost like learning what the piece of art has to say as opposed to like imposing your own. Uh, uh it's the whole first part of the art chapter where he talks about the harp of
Oh,
Peiwo or whatever, where
the
the master harp, like the harp is built from this uh beautiful, powerful ancient tree, and all of the harpists try and play it and they can't like get it to play anything good, and then the master harpist plays it, and the beautiful stuff comes out, and he's like, it's because I let the harp play what the harp wanted to play.
Yeah.
Um,
You know,
let me see. The master.
because
Oh, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say it's like the connection between, like letting that connection form between what the piece is and yourself. But
The sympathetic communication of minds necessary for art appreciation must be based on mutual concession. The spectator must cultivate the proper attitude for receiving the message. The artist must know how to impart it.
hmm
Approach a great painting as you would approach a great prince. In order to understand a masterpiece, you must lay yourself low before it and await to be bathed with bated breath at its least utterance. Oh yeah, okay, here's what I was looking for. An eminent song critic once made the charming confession, said he, "In my young days I praised the master whose pictures I liked. But as my judgment matured, I praised myself for liking what the masters had chosen to have me like." It's
hmm
kind of interesting.
yeah, no, yeah, that one, that was like, I've noticed that one every time I've read it. It's a very interesting way to think about it.
Yeah.
Where it is going, kind of going from the, oh, this is neat, and going to just having that moment and realizing that like you have a connection to this thing, to this other, to whoever created it through that piece, and having like a transcendent experience.
Yeah. And he says it a little later in that same, I won't read it, but it's like according the master, like the courtesy, like being like, because he said, the master artist is some who knows how to like impart the feeling.
Mm-hmm.
So being like, okay, well, you knew what you were doing, so now I'm going to like pay attention and see if I can like learn the lesson or whatever, or like feel the feeling.
Mm-hmm. Which, I mean, that's a cool thing because that's going from just art appreciation, but also art creation,
Mm-hmm.
and like thinking about, seriously, about like when you're creating something, and
Yeah.
kind of what separates just like a good artist from a great artist is how well they can impart something in their work and understand why it works and how to use that.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm. I really love this section on art.
Yeah, that's
It
it's
gives
my
you so
favorite.
many like little nuggets that kind of change your perspective on a lot of things. Where it's just like I never thought about it that way.
So the contemporary thing is interesting. Here's my example. Um, as I have I have ideas going through my head for animated short film over the years. There's I often really like the idea of using old music. Like I'll go through. I found some really fun, kind of like obscure old like '60s soundtracks that are actually super cool.
Uh huh.
Um, and it's like kind of fun and novel, and it imparts a certain mood. But recently, as I have been kind of preparing to try and make a little short film, I realized that those old soundtracks were kind of like novel, but I found music that was contemporary from like somebody who's making music now,
Mhm.
because I realized that music actually like moved me
Mhm.
versus like the old stuff would be better. It would be like it's like fun to
Mhm.
use like it'd be fun to like use the old stuff, and I still would like to at some point.
Yeah.
But the for what I'm going for, which is to like again, like he's saying, in whatever amateurish way I can, to try
Mhm.
and like evoke specific feelings. I'm like this like modern music, it kind of like belongs to like our time and place.
Mhm.
I don't know how to describe that, but like it evokes things for me
Uh-huh.
that a lot of like older music actually doesn't. That's I don't know. That's like a hard idea to explain, but something I've like realized in
Yeah.
like a lot of times the kind of like era you belong to, like you still kind of belong to it, even if it's kind of lame.
Yeah. Yeah, there's always like some element of that cuz it's something that it's like a it's the context in which you exist and that you understand.
Yeah.
Even if there might be a lot of things you don't like, it's like you still get it, right?
Mhm.
You still understand like how people make sure it didn't fall.
Yeah.
Um
I'm not gonna
I
I'm
don't
not
know
gonna
at
make
what
the
point it
same
falls
mistake
off.
like I think it's probably either ready for more water or to be turned off. I
I
think
don't know how much you can get out of this
this
tea's
this
going
this
got
tea
some
can
mileage on
yeah, this tea can be steeped I think for like infinity.
it.
I actually am pretty sure it can be steeped for a long time. Actually, you know what? Oh nope, I'm not gonna put that back in.
No, that
If I
goes
recall,
really bad each time.
when Nice Tea Lady, um, when she gave me this, you start out with like a few seconds, and then I think by now we could actually probably leave it in there for a little while.
Mhm.
But I forgot. I've been pulling it out after a few seconds. It's still pretty great.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know. That's something he talks about in a couple places, like in the architecture. He talks about the West being very like slavish to classical like architectural forms.
Yeah.
Uh, and never like innovating on it, which is interesting. We've talked
We've
about
talked
architecture.
yeah.
It's like how it's because I don't know, modern stuff seems so crappy, but one one example. This is kind of like going off on a little bit of a tangent, but one example is uh, Frank Lloyd Wright made a lot of really cool houses, and he was specifically trying to like make something new. He
Yeah.
was like, I want these houses to be like American houses. He called them Usonian, like US Onion, I guess.
Yeah.
But a lot of them are super cool, and they had like a specific idea, which is they're kind of supposed to be like, they're all sort of like short and long, and they're supposed to be kind of like rising out of the ground almost.
Mhm.
Like, and he always prepared them with a whole lot of like dense vegetation around them, so they're always like kind of like this like roof kind of poking out of the foliage,
Yeah.
and they're cool. I like them a lot, and it's interesting that that just didn't ever go anywhere really.
It was just him.
Yeah, it was
I
just
mean,
him.
there's some that are people try doing kind of knockoff stuff,
Yeah,
but I don't nobody even came close to making stuff as cool as his stuff.
yeah. It just
That they just weren't the same like level of artist.
because it they always strike me as a successful attempt at that kind of thing.
Mhm.
Like they're uh they're unique, but they're also very beautiful.
Mhm.
Uh, yeah. So it's just like it, as opposed to like I said in the book, in the T section, there's a like a little paragraph where he talks about the West being really.
Mhm.
I think it's like right there with when he talks about the West building with stones, but he's like, you're really like slavish to like old forms of architecture that like
Hmm.
what about like new stuff?
Yeah. I mean, kind of, but also most places are basically like that. I mean, Japan's not really all that different
Yeah,
in
that's
that
what I
regard.
was thinking.
So, I mean, hey, if I mean the way I see it is like, hey, if something works, it works. And the you know classical architecture, it's got a lot of things about it that work really well. But
Well,
yeah,
and
I get what he's saying
yeah,
though. Like having trying to be in a time and place is important, and not being like so obsessed with the past that it kind of controls you.
yeah. Well, and when I was kind of like doing a deep dive many months ago in classical architecture, the kind of like the modern theory is that it's like, yeah, understand it, and then you can once you like understand classical architecture, you can riff on it however you like. Like
Mhm.
that, there's a lot of room to like grow and explore and be creative.
Mhm.
You don't have to like things
Well,
don't have to look like Greek temples per se.
yeah. But also, you do have to do it right,
Yeah.
and I think usually it doesn't get done right,
No.
or you end up with like evil-looking buildings and stuff, like the courthouse.
It's kind of the it's
But
kind of the trouble is art's hard in like every
yeah,
aspect.
yeah,
You always get a whole lot of like not good stuff, I guess. Maybe.
hmm I don't know. I was like just thinking about kind of architecture and kind of some of the stuff he says. I was also thinking about like when we were looking at a lot of arts and crafts styles houses. I feel like he'd be on board with those.
Yeah, I think those definitely.
He'd probably be pretty into like stuff where they like build walls or whatever out of the like bent bricks and whatnot.
Yeah. Oh yeah, arch actually that's a I
The
mean there
arts and crafts is like very kind of Tao in a
yeah.
way, where it's a lot of I mean there's definitely a lot of things where there's kind of like a very like mathematical structure to it with like furniture sometimes,
Yeah.
but also a lot of it is like let's make something beautiful out of like imperfect things.
Yeah, let's like let the wood look pretty as wood.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also, it's an example I mean that's an example of a really like successful kind of uh like it's kind of its own thing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I really like arts and crafts houses are awesome.
Oh yeah, they're super awesome. I think if you were to be like, Casey, what kind of house would you have right now? I'd be like, arts and crafts, go. Can buy my
They're so awesome.
yeah,
But anyway, that'll be another time we should talk about
we
those.
should. But yeah,
Just
that
look at a bunch of pretty pictures of arts and crafts houses.
it is. I like you just said. It is. I think a good example of something I think he'd be on board with.
I mean, I guess a lot of that would have been not too long after this book was written.
And it's
That
sort
that
of
like started to become a thing probably what like 1920s or
yeah,
something.
yeah, 1910
Probably
to
in like 1910s, yeah.
yeah,
And
and
I think it's still kind of a thing today.
yeah,
Not as much, but
because the idea was that there was everything had been industrialized and people were like, hey, can I have like a house and furniture that's made out of, you know, like beautiful materials and like made by hand for me?
Yeah,
That's kind of the idea behind it.
yeah. Instead of factory,
Yeah.
just factory produced furniture and like factory produced house. Didn't want to live in a Sears catalog prefab house.
Yeah.
But yeah, so no, I think it's really interesting though the idea of kind of the ephemeral art appreciation moment in the tea ceremony.
Yeah, it's a really lovely idea.
Also, well, at the end of the book, it's like really cool before because when he's telling the story of the death of what's his name,
Rikyu?
Rikyu,
Seno
where he
Rikyu?
has his last tea ceremony, and he like gives away his stuff as like souvenirs, and was it his like some bowl or something that he uses for the ceremony? He breaks. He's like,
Mm-hmm.
this will never be used.
Yeah.
Will never like touch the lips of another person again, and shatters it. Cause it like is like the kind of apotheosis of tea ceremony everything, where it's like not only is this like this temporary ephemeral moment of appreciation of art, and this tea is like literally this guy's last tea ceremony, just kind of making everything about it just that it's done.
Mm-hmm.
Here, take this cup as a souvenir. And then he kills himself. But by the way, that's how the book ends, is with like a ritual suicide.
Yeah, be careful around warlords.
Yeah,
They
that's
might
that's
they might
the
command you to
that's
kill
the
yourself.
actual moral of the story of the whole book is be careful about being friends with warlords because they might kill you out of intrigue from people conspiring against them,
Yeah.
and you get tangled up in that unwittingly.
Yeah, you might be the greatest team master of all time, but if your like best friend is the cruel warlord.
He might be cruel to you sometimes.
Yeah. But yeah.
Hey, at least like I mean, he says in the book where he's like, well, at least he gave him the dignity for him to end his own life rather than whatever he could have done, and let him have his ceremony with his friends. But yeah,
Yeah, and that's like yeah, cuz if I mean, I've like I said before, I've done very very limited research on that, but it sounded like oh, Hideyoshi or whoever the warlord guy really 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 liked the team master,
mm-hmm.
but sometimes you gotta kill people when you're a warlord.
Yep. No, yeah, that
You know, all you warlords out there, you know how it be. You know how it be. Sometimes sometimes the intrigue gets you and you just gotta
gotta get rid of that tea master
I feel like the
when he's cramping your style. He's a warlord.
I feel like just all the mob bosses are just nodding. They're like, "Oh yeah, I had to kill my friend. It was a bummer." Uh,
Basically.
here's the thing we were talking about earlier. Kind of a kind of a left turn, but still in the art section.
Mm-hmm.
It is it is much to be regretted that so much of the apparent enthusiasm for art at the present day has no foundation in real feeling. In this democratic age of ours, men clamor for what is popularly considered the best, regardless of their feelings. They want the costly, not the refined, the fashionable, not the beautiful. To the masses, the contemplation of illustrated periodicals, the worthy product of their own industrialism, would give more digestible food for artistic enjoyment than the early Italians or the Ashikaga masters, who they pretend to admire.
Mm.
The name of the artist is more important to them than the quality of the work. As the Chinese critic complained many centuries ago, people criticize a picture by their ear.
Yeah. That's the one I was thinking of earlier.
Kind of just a fun, like, complain about modern stuff moment for us.
Yes.
But he's not wrong.
He's still right.
It is the lack of genuine appreciation that is responsible for the great pseudo classic horrors that today greet us wherever we turn. A little,
If
that's a little
only
different. I feel like now we have like weird, like modernist
I know.
horrors,
I know. It's
but
like now we have like what's worse is like the horrors of the things from whatever he's talking about. It's like he had no idea how bad things could get.
yeah, because he's probably like he says pseudo classic. He's probably just like, oh, people just making I don't know, like really terrible rip-offs of the masters.
Yeah.
You know, like I don't know,
I don't know. I don't
but things
yeah, what would he have been
yeah,
around
pseudo
in like
classical horrors.
1906 in Japan? I don't know. Anyway, yeah,
But
his observations are still like correct, I would say. Just like the idea of being interested in things just because it's the popular thing.
yeah,
It's like, oh, I like this because other people like it. Sometimes there's a lot of things where I feel like that's the case, but I don't know. Maybe people actually like it.
yeah.
I don't know. But
There's
I mean, there's been things where I've been recommended like a movie or a TV show or something. And sometimes I watch it or listen to it or something or read whatever. And I'm like, I don't get what the hype is.
yeah, since nobody is listening and it's doubtful anyone ever will. This sounds a teeny bit snobby, but anytime I anytime you interact uh with neighbors or some new people you've had them over for dinner, it's almost like inevitable that the what TV shows are you watching
Yeah.
comes up.
I mean, it's just normal
It is normal
conversation.
and there's nothing wrong with it, but I don't watch any. And
Well, I
about
know I
most of them you're like, "Oh, that just this is where it sounds snobby, but it just sounds so dreadful." A lot of them. That's not to say there aren't some pretty great TV shows out there that definitely are. But the kind of like oftentimes like this like whatever's on like the pop culture menu is pretty sounds
yeah.
pretty dreadful usually.
Yeah,
You're
it's
like,
there's a lot of stuff where I'm like, I'm not
you're
not
like,
interested in it.
I don't know. I don't really like need to go through examples.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I'll always ask like, oh, what's that one about? I have a, well, yeah, I'm not gonna go into examples either.
Yeah. Um,
I
and it's
feel
not.
like it'll come across too mean. I actually don't have any ill will towards people that
Yeah.
talk.
Well.
It's just like for me personally, like I just don't have. That's not like interesting to me personally that much.
Well, and some again, some of them are awesome. Some of
Hmm.
these TV shows, and I'm just not interested in watching them. Some of them sound dreadful. I'm sure that
Yeah,
like whatever. I think the modern take on this complaint of his, where he's talking about like things being like um a modern take on this little section, or like one of the modern complaints is stuff that's made for content's sake and
yeah,
not for not just to be like a great TV show, but people when they're just like when a streaming service just needs content. And I've heard this now as kind of like the put down, right? Is like you're like, oh, this show's just content.
yeah. It's just like a thing that was made because Netflix needed a new show.
Yeah,
Also, I mean, that's in my opinion, that's basically what like Disney live action
yeah,
remakes are. There's like we just need to make stuff. It's like I don't. Well, we already have these stories. Well, we already animated these. We don't really want to animate them again. That's a lot of work. We'll just we'll just get some actors and kind of just use the same script and do it shot for shot. Why not? It's kind of the his thing about the was it the like fake classical
the pseudo classical
pseudo
horrors.
classical horrors.
Oh yeah, that's not
That's
that's
basically what it is. It's the pseudo
that's a funny way of
classic,
thinking about that, but
just
that's
just in the realm of film
yeah,
rather than architecture, where it's like you have these things that are kind of recognized as like essentially great works just being like rehashed, and they're not really the same at all, and they're just devoid of like the same feeling because it's like, well, this was already done in the time that it was done, in the excellent way that it was accomplished. You can't just like recreate that with like the same thing. So it's just kind of a weird like doppelganger
yeah.
that just feels wrong. Like to me it like feels very wrong to do something like that. Some people don't mind. I don't know. I mind.
Yeah.
I like I can't watch any of those. Like just the concept of them existing is like very off-putting to me. So like I don't care if maybe they are okay. It's like no, they aren't I don't know. It's like why? Like even just on the basis of, well, why would I watch live action new Lion King when I could literally just watch the old one that is like I already know is awesome. It's like what it's like you didn't improve it. I highly doubt that it's better.
Oh, you know for sure it's not. That's kind of the thing.
That's what
Like
it's
none
like.
of
It's
these.
never gonna be better
Oh
than the
yeah,
original one. So it's like what do you again, it exists because they're like, well, we gotta make something. We just gotta do stuff.
and this is in like a super cynical business way. It's like a safe bet. They're just like, oh well, people recognize
Beauty and the Beast.
Beauty and the Beast. People recognize Star Wars. People, whatever.
Yeah,
Uh,
whatever it is.
the again because there's nobody
Whoa.
here. I know there we had
The
3 viewers
spike.
for like 2 seconds. And we were like talking about the Disney Channel.
It like picked it up and decided to show people.
They were like, "This isn't the Book of Tea."
They're talking about Disney movies.
The when we were talking with our oh we've lost everybody. We've flatlined. We were talking with everybody at the little party we had,
Yeah.
and like I should reframe this. I don't. Oh, just it was brought up um that there's a new live action Airbender coming up,
Oh, that's right.
and that it actually looks fairly nice, but it's kind of like, thankfully, again, because I like people to agree with me. Thankfully, pretty much everyone in the room was like, "I don't want to watch that." Again, not that there's anything wrong with that, but because it looks like it has a very, very high production value, but it's kind of like, well, but does it matter if you just because you're just making it just
You're just making the same thing
you're just
again.
making the same thing again, almost certainly worse.
Yeah.
Even
Again,
if
it's like I like it's almost impossible to make it better. Because already you have the expectation that's like, well, if it's not like it in any way, that's a that's a knock on its quality. And if you don't change anything, what was the point?
like
So,
when
so
it's
it's
like when a band does a cover and they sing the song exactly how it was before, and you're like, well, okay, like I guess the value of this
I
is
guess
your
it's the
voice.
same. I it's like
The
I
Weezer does this, and it's kind of funny because they like sing the song the same, but you're like, I don't know, your voice was almost enough to make it different. Like
yeah.
like their covers are almost like awesome just because it's a different. I don't know. I say this just because they're an interesting example of like almost pulling it off, but they don't change it.
Yeah. Um but yeah, I don't there's always something like that. There's the ugh, just like the rehashing of things,
Yeah.
which I mean kind of happens no matter what. But when it's like so blatant, it's like kind of crazy to me that that happens. I
Well, so
it's like it's not even like, oh well, what if we did uh Lion King, but this time they're space aliens. You could at least do that, and maybe you could make it enjoyable. But they're like, no, it's literally the same thing. Like it's baffling to me. Where they're like, we're just doing the same thing again. We're not really.
and what's
They'll
baffling,
change up stuff, but it'd be like stuff where you're like, what does that have to? It's like not an interesting change or anything.
or it's like weirdly horrible.
Yeah.
Like when like the fun example is like latest Little Mermaid, and they all of the little sea creatures are like 3D monstrosities. Did you have like a character designer look at this? Like did you call in anybody who like knows what things look like and has a sense.
Did,
I don't even know.
did you talk to anybody that knows how to make stuff look good?
Yeah, or were you like, do you know what's fun if we like try and get like a fish to talk? I don't know with these.
Nobody's ever done that before.
Well, with the strangest, with the strange, they're like, what if it doesn't have any like aesthetics to it? It's not like cartoony at all. It's like this weird talking fish. What if they're all like that? And you know
And
that like that's like all of them, but that's just a
yeah,
Madeline will like Madeline has her pulse on pop culture, so I get like shown the funny memes.
yeah.
And so yeah, all of like these just strange, ugly designs for the
For like Sebastian.
yeah. Well, I mean, Sebastian was like especially weird. Sebastian was like um I can't even remember what he looked like except for that his eyes were almost cartoony kind of. I don't know. Anyway, the Book of Tea. Yeah, like all of the
Whoa.
I don't know. Um
Mm.
to like have this deep appreciation and like this deep experience with art is like a little foreign. Uh I wish that I'm sort of like my mind's kind of over the place. Um I mean I enjoy looking at Pinterest. I was telling Madeline the other day that on my computer it's very functional when I'm working.
Mhm.
I gather reference on Pinterest.
Yeah.
It's like a different attitude than when I'm on my phone. I'll open it up and it's like I'm passing by these great masterpieces of all ages and they're itty bitty and I'm like it's like they're like little mini Oreos for me to eat. I'm like, well that it's like the museum like we were talking about. You're like, well that's neat. Well that's neat. Well that's neat. Well that's
Mhm.
neat.
Yeah.
Just one more, commentary on the weird way we like what weirdness of social media.
I know that. Well, that's
Can of worms.
a whole nother thing.
It's kind of like another angle at what we were just talking about of the
Well, that's more the aspect of the critiquing a picture by your ears sort of a
yeah.
deal. Where you're starting to get into the loss of ability to appreciate things because you're so heavily affected by people's opinions. Because I mean, with social media, it's like a space specifically designed to be bombarded by people's words, basically.
Yeah.
Um, it's basically just an opinion mill. You can see all the opinions in the world there.
It's
And you can
like
see all the opinions of all your friends and family if you want. And you can let that affect you.
and I think the opinion of your herd is always like important for us.
Hmm.
But social media is extra weird because yeah, it's like all of like our weird like disembodied brains and they've been like thrown together and
Or something.
or something. Who knows? Well, how did we like
We've
describe it
talked
many
about.
years ago? Like we're like a bunch of like weird like ghosts of ourselves interacting with
Yeah,
each other. It's like you're like weird ghost that you put out there and it's interacting with other people's like weird ghost.
yeah. But your brain's tricked into thinking that you're actually talking with the actual people,
Yeah.
but in a way, you're not at all. Instead, you're like talking through like five different filters
Yeah.
that you normally wouldn't have when you're just talking to somebody like in person. But
Yeah, you're
that,
like
that's
not.
a
Yeah, that's like not
that's like a whole
different.
horror show that what's his bucket?
Oh, Kakuzo. Oh,
The,
Kakura.
the Kakuzo would have never imagined. I he'd probably I don't know what his opinion on that would be. It'd almost be like this is like the intrusion of like everybody into your space at all times.
And in a way, the idea of like a real tea ceremony is really sort of like on the opposite end of the spectrum.
Yeah. It's
'Cause
like very exclusive,
yeah,
very private.
and it's very like real, like you're there with four or five people and you're having like you said, this sort of like experience that is just it's sort of like well, ephemeral.
Well, yeah.
It's exclusive in the sense that it's only gonna happen like the once.
Hmm.
I mean, you could have more than one tea ceremony, but
Each
ideally it's
one's going to be a different
yeah,
thing.
because the tea master is gonna curate it specially each and every single one with the which is a really 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 lovely idea. The idea that you'd be like, well, I'm gonna have some people over and it's autumn and the art will be my beautiful autumnal piece of art will be on display
With your
and
autumnal like flower arrangement
yeah, and you're
to
like
accompany that.
and the flower arrangement will like call to mind autumnalness
Yeah.
and
Instead of, hey, I saw this cool thing on Pinterest.
yeah,
Oh, that's neat. Oh, look at this post on Instagram. That's pretty neat.
and it's an experience that's like um
Here's this thing that 5 million other people saw.
yeah, that gave
That
it
must mean it's neat.
yeah,
Instead of,
a tea ceremony is like here's this experience that only like four people got to have
yeah,
and they were real and they were there. And like it's like there's like a physicalness to like this goes for anything where you're with real people.
mm-hmm,
Like you're breathing the same air and you're reading body language and there's like people's smells that's like actually a pretty important thing that none of us really think about because
yeah,
but yeah, we're so a tea ceremony is like a lovely moment in that sense.
mm-hmm. No, for sure. There aren't enough things like that,
No.
especially now.
Talk about the
Like what's even like an equivalent thing? What even comes close?
just having some dinner with some friends or family
Yeah.
probably.
Yeah.
But it's not like it's not
It's not quite the same.
it's no because it's not even like curated.
Yeah.
Or I mean
It could.
it could be cuz I really love this idea so I kind of try,
Mm-hmm.
but even then it's like like you saw you come over for some ravioli
Mm-hmm.
and it's not like a it's like a haphazard chaotic thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like this. Not like a tea ceremony, which is like this hyper curated, lovely experience.
Yeah.
I don't know what the
Because there's like, I don't know. I mean, not that I was thinking that there was anything, but because even just like spaces where, I don't know, you usually don't have much
no.
that way. It's usually, I mean, in a way, exclusive things are almost like not sought out.
Mm-hmm.
Like people almost don't want exclusive things, but that kind of is what makes something special. Is if it's something that is that you know you could experience it. It's much more like personal
Mm-hmm.
and special that way.
I'm gonna take a quick break. Then I don't know. We could talk about the fun flower chapter.
Or another time.
Yeah, that's actually true. This is
It's kind of late.
yeah, and I feel like we've kind of like
The art thing was probably the big one I wanted to talk about anyway.
well, cause and it's like the flower chapter's fun, but it's I don't know.
It's something I don't know as much about, but it is like very fascinating the way he kind of talks about that and how everything kind of fits together.
Well, and it's like excuse me. Like I was saying before, some of it's like a little like I agree with him, but I'm sort of like, well, I don't know. I'm gonna keep buying like bunches of flowers that were like chopped up.
Yeah.
The flowers might be sad about it. I don't know. I don't know if I've got like enough in my life to like worry about
How the flowers feel
how
about
the
it.
flowers feel
Though I
about
do
it.
love his when he like describes like the like flower master
Oh
and like
yeah.
as if it's like a horror movie or something.
Yeah.
He's like, imagine that you're trapped there and this guy shows up who says he's basically a doctor for flowers and he has like a saw and knives and then he like tears you out of the ground and puts you in a confined space and you're like slowly dying of thirst and he's like keeping you alive with all these like chemicals and stuff and he's like really excited about the fact that he can keep you alive for so long. And it's like you'll just be wondering why you couldn't have just died.
Yeah.
So,
And you're kind of like, well, I sure hope flowers don't feel like that. What if they
it's like
do?
really horrific.
What if they do?
Hmm. But yeah, well, Casey's gone. I I haven't read the physical copy of the book. I've just listened to it, and we've been meaning to do this episode for a while. And it just keeps getting like interrupted by life stuff. So I've actually ended up listening to the audiobook of this probably like 5 times. And it makes me really want to actually do a tea ceremony. But I don't know how you go about that. I just like the idea of how deliberate everything is. it's very calming to think about, you know, having somebody prepare this experience for you and to kind of prepare yourself for it. You dress up for it. You know, you spend the time to kind of separate your mind from the world to experience this time with tea and art and flowers with friends or just other people who can appreciate those things. Obviously, we don't have a little tea hut anywhere. I mean, you could probably get close enough. In a way, that's kind of what we're doing right now. I was just talking to the nobody
To the nobody.
about how kind of what we're doing right now is a little bit of a tea ceremony
That's
of
true.
sorts, except not quite, but sort of. I mean, in a way that it's being recorded makes it a little bit not,
Yeah.
but also it isn't a tea ceremony, but it's kind
No.
of similar. We're more like contemplating thoughts and of our own and of other people while we enjoy tea in a little room in a basement. Still pleasant.
Yeah. It's a little closer.
Closer to anything else
Yeah.
that I've done. So
Again, kind of the only thing I can think of would be if you were to
just
have
actually
a
do a tea ceremony,
Oh yeah, yeah. Again,
or at least
someday.
try to.
Something like that. I mean, I've talked to you about the idea of having like uh of like a curated like I forgot even what I called it, but where I'd like essentially like make a game that I would like curate live like with friends and like it'd be like a Dungeons and Dragons kind of scenario where you're like
Yeah,
but the whole thing would be
I don't know. I don't remember what
I had a name for it.
we yeah, I don't remember the term.
But I mean but the whole like thing like I've tried to explain kind of what my sort of the feeling of my artistic ideas or project would be over the years, and one of them would be like a haunted tea ceremony. So this one way to like kind of describe it.
Mm-hmm.
Tea ceremony because of this kind of like kind of like follows like the pattern of a tea ceremony,
Yeah.
and haunted because it's I'm trying to like convey that kind of like vivid feeling that you would get from like a real experience. Haunted might not be a good word, but it's kind of fun.
Let's make it spooky.
Well, that's probably wise because all this started all being like, oh, it's gonna be ghostly and spooky, but I've sort of like gone away from that more and more and more and more. It's
Yeah.
less and less horror, or less and less like ghostly.
Mm-hmm.
Although Again, I'm just talking sort of like vaguely about, but essentially, so I'm trying to make a little short film. The idea is it wouldn't be like narrative essentially. Like
Okay.
it's people like in a place doing a thing. So it is narrative, but it's not like important like the characters, it's not like character arcs, and
Yeah.
it's trying to get the feeling across. Like, say you're on a road trip and you step out of the car at the gas station and it's all kind of new and exciting and like the wind hits you and you feel very like you're like very like there and it's like very vivid, and I like those feelings a lot.
Mhm.
And so it's just kind of trying to, or like you go somewhere new, like you go into the little mountain cabin that you're on vacation with and your senses are all like very alert and you're like smelling it.
Mhm. Yeah.
I don't know. So again, then the artist's task is, can you hope to convey any of that with with whatever medium you're working in?
Mhm.
If that's kind of what I'm trying to get at, like it's hard.
Yes, it is hard. Mm.
But yeah, essentially the characters go to a place, have an experience. You never know their names. It's not really like about that. So yeah, it's trying to like get it like the fun feeling of like the experience of being in a place. That sounds, I don't know how that sounds
Just
terrible.
in a place in general.
Yeah, I think I already explained it good. Uh,
Yeah, it's like showing up somewhere new and taking in everything because it's
yeah,
all a novel experience.
which would be how a tea ceremony would be supposed to be too, because the whole thing should be very like, it would be very like sensuous
Mhm.
and like vivid, because it'd be like an experience very much like outside of like normal everyday life, which is when you have experiences like that, right? It's like I said, when you're on vacation
Yeah.
or when you do something that's new and exciting and suddenly your brain is like awake, cuz when normal everyday life you kind of get into your grooves
Yeah.
and there's a lot of things that are like habitualized. But
Mhm.
when you do something new and exciting, doesn't have to be a vacation, but vacation's just a really easy example, and your brain is like called back to life, and suddenly you're just like smelling all the new smells and everything is like vivid and you're listening, and
Yeah. You're just like,
which would be very much I think what a tea ceremony was supposed to be doing. I think it's supposed to make, and it's supposed to be very like peaceful. It's not supposed to be like too exciting.
yeah, it's more, it's evoking things within you because you're like specifically creating a new experience.
But it is
Like
supposed to,
creating like a feeling of a place
yeah,
in a way.
but it is supposed to be 100%. It's supposed to be like a little a little like step outside of like everyday life,
Yeah.
which is part of what would give it its potency, which is an interesting thought.
Mhm.
I guess
Uh,
people don't like get together and play music at all anymore, but that would be something that would be kind of similar.
what, just like a jam session?
I mean, it would like back in the day, you would have been like, "Hey, we're gonna go over to Bob's because he has a piano," and everyone would have like jammed or been like there like grooving, but somebody like, but like Sally's got a new book of songs.
Yeah, yeah. Now it's just like I've let's listen to some Spotify.
Yeah, well, it's like I have the entire history of music at my fingertips.
I mean that's yeah.
It almost becomes less special, which is funny.
Well, it's kind of. I mean, I've talked to a number of people like about this, but how with for example, cassette tapes or even CDs. When you put music on those, like you want to make your own road trip
Yeah,
CD or mixtape, suddenly because you have those constraints, you think a lot more about, okay, if I can only put like 3 songs on this side of this cassette tape, what are those 3 songs going to be? You have to be a lot more
yeah.
deliberate because there's a limitation. It's kind of the same thing with the tea ceremony. It is constrained,
Mm,
right? Like you can't just like throw in whatever. You're like, there's the elements that have to be there. You have to follow kind of a rule set. But because of those limitations, you kind of can, you're almost are given a great creative tool
yeah.
that you can work with because of that.
So that's another thing we didn't really uh talk about is him talking about um the power of like constraint and suggestion. That's a pretty big like section. Although if it is late, we can always kind of
I mean, we're already on that.
yeah. Let's
It'd
see.
be good to bring up.
Let me see if I can find it. Mm. But yeah, because I mean, we both know. Yeah, constraint is actually a super duper great creative tool, like you just said.
Yeah. It's unintuitive if you've never
Yeah,
gone through the creative process, but it's very real though. if if you have like a situation where it's kind of like you can do whatever you want, suddenly like your ability to think of things is limited. It's why annoying like if you're doing like a freelance thing and your clients is like you can kind of do whatever.
mm-hmm.
You're kind of like this is unhelpful. I kind of hate this. But if they give you like very specific parameters, suddenly you're like your mind goes wild with possibilities.
The funny thing is they'll give you they'll be like do whatever, and then you do whatever, and they're like, then they'll want something very specific.
And then you're like, why didn't you just say
Yep, yep. This
that?
happened to me a couple times. They're like, actually, I meant this, and you're like, well, you sure didn't say that. You just did tell me to do whatever, and I did whatever. Mm, let's see.
Well, it's kind of like at work. If a customer asks, "Oh, just give me an assortment," I'll always ask, "Well, which ones do you want?" And most of the time they'll have something specific in mind, and I think that's kind of funny.
Yeah,
It's like, what? No, you didn't want just an assortment. You wanted something very specific. it's What is it like tingling,
I don't know,
tinkling sound?
but it heard that we heard. Oh, it's back. It sounds like something from over there for me, unless hold on. It's the very subtle
It's
teapot,
the teapot. The teapot
like
is
ever so subtly
tinkling.
tinkling. All right. I thought there was like a section that where he talked, like a whole section where he talks about it. It's kind of sprinkled throughout, but here's a just a part to read. The great masters of both East and the West never forgot the value of suggestion as a means of taking the spectator into their confidence. Who can contemplate a masterpiece without being awed by the immense vista of thought presented for our consideration? Um, how familiar and sympathetic they all are, how cold in contrast is the modern commonplaces. In the former, we feel the warm outpouring of a man's heart. In the latter, only a formal salute. There's your live action Disney. Um, it's not quite what I was getting at, because I know for engrossing and that's all interesting. I was
Mhm.
trying to, because there's a part where he talks about specifically like Asian. Oh, you know what? It's in the Taoism and Zen section because he's talking about the influence of Taoism on art and
Oh.
how they'll just like the power of suggestion where it's like, oh well, this brushstroke, there's only a couple brushstrokes and you get like a beautiful field in wind,
Yes.
right?
Okay.
That's in that section, which I'm not even gonna look into.
Not right now.
Yeah, but
Wait.
how much can be communicated with only like some very restrained effort,
Mhm.
right? Like things don't need to be, I don't know, baroque.
Yeah. Doesn't need to be.
Because I mean, this is kind of your doing the printmaking. You study all the prints, and so many of those like Chinese and Japanese prints are so like the power is in the suggestion.
Mhm. I mean, yeah, if you look at how a lot of times like sky is done, it's just like a blue gradient and a red gradient, and it it's weird how it conveys that it's sky. Because if you like really like think about it, you're like, what? It's like doesn't it feels weird when you like think about it too much, but it feels right when you just like see it in the context of like how everything's done.
Yeah, and something he talks about in here, which I couldn't find immediately, was how that's like that's something that like a master artist would do to like, and it's like interplay with your audience in the sense that you're like you fill in some of the details, but right, that means that the person is like participating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, yeah. Yeah, a good piece of art is like a conversation in a way.
Yeah, and they can be busy,
Mm-hmm.
like a Monet or something.
But you can still have ways to
Yeah.
open things for the viewer to fill something in and to contemplate things.
Right. What's a sasan? So
What is a sasan?
yeah, it's the thing that the story of the samurai who used his body to shield the great piece of art in the fire.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And listening to it, I was like, did he say a cezanne? Like, is he saving like a Western painting? And I thought he was, but it's a cezanne,
Uh,
which I don't know. It's a landscape. It's a specific. It's a cezanne was a monk of the Soto sect of Buddhism. Satha artist is a landscape. Because I thought he was saving a cezanne, and I was like, that's weird but cool. That there would be like this Japanese play about a samurai like saving like his Cezanne painting. But no, it's this. Or, something that it's the artist. Yeah. That he sam a samurai sacrificed himself to save some art. That's how important art is. Amen.
He used like his blood to keep it from burning or
Yeah,
something.
yeah, he shielded it from his body, like he basically like put the art inside of him to protect it.
Which I feel like that would have ruined it. But
That's what I think every time I listen.
and I'm like, I don't.
But it says he wrapped it up first. Maybe he wrapped it up in some heavy duty.
Well, I guess yeah. He says he wrapped it in like his like torn
Yeah.
robe or something.
But it does feel
I still
like
feel like
your
that's
guts
still
would
that's gonna soak through.
would be almost as bad as the fire as far as ruining your saison. But maybe not.
Um,
All right. Well, you get the last bit of tea there.
all right. That's a good one. Last,
It's,
it's like kind of crazy how much you can make out of that.
yeah.
And it's like still like
I don't think
with the green tea, it like really starts like watering down. This one's like
yeah, green tea you can only do it a couple times. This one and also some white tea I have. Pretty much I've like not reached the end. I've tried before. I've like just kept going and going and going.
just endless tea.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the Book of Tea.
It's about tea,
It's about
and we drank tea.
we drank tea. We didn't drink matcha though. I thought about bringing matcha. Would have been more appropriate.
Yeah, technically.
Yeah. Even though it's not very good matcha, so
Yeah,
I add honey and cream to it, which I think
that's.
would probably make him unhappy.
Mm-hmm.
Probably make a lot of tea masters unhappy. We just won't tell them. It's kind of like if Miyazaki ever showed up to look at my animation, I'd like hide under the table.
Just leave the building.
Yeah, you just like jump out a window
Oh,
before he tells me that it would be best that I not be alive or whatever.
it's like your life is a waste.
Yeah.
Ugh.
For all my for all of my artsy fartsy talk, we saw The Boy and the Heron, and I think it's like got like a pretty um it's pretty like uh what's the word? conceptual. I don't know, like just if you just go off of like the story, it's weird, and I kind of didn't like it. Although the more I think about it, the more I've kind of like I'd like to see it again.
Mm.
But yeah, for all my artsy fartsy talk, the second something was like didn't make sense in like a really normal story kind of way, I was like, hey,
Yeah.
it feels it feels like it's like all out. Like Miyazaki's just like it's like completely in his head. It's like super de duper uber de 100% like autobiographical,
Mm.
and everything is like too symbolic a little bit. Like you can just tell that everything's supposed to mean something, which
Yeah.
is not my favorite kind of thing, but I do want to see it again.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, upon first viewing, I was just sort of like confused
Yeah.
because like the story itself. Because this thing is Miyazaki's actually really good at sticking things in a pretty like clean story.
Mm-hmm.
Like everything's like couched in like a very like clear and like digestible story.
Yeah.
And this one was definitely like a little more like just kind of all over the place and weird. And I feel like you're supposed to kind of like not give it that much, not like cling that much to the story. I guess I don't know.
The story's just like there because it has to be.
Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
Aha. What
This
did you
is
say?
Jason's.
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost like it almost like sent me on like a learning about Miyazaki.
Mm-hmm.
Uh like I've been learning more about Miyazaki in the last like few weeks simply because there's so much. It's just like 100% like a little weird symbolic. I say little weird. It's not that sounds mean, but it's just like it's like too symbolic. I don't know. It's like a symbolic autobiography where every
Yeah.
single thing you're like, is this person you, Miyazaki, or is this your mentor, or is this your father?
Yeah. Hmm.
But yeah, it's like I do want to see it again. Like the farther I've gotten away from it, the more I want to see it more or again. But it's
Now that you know more about him.
yeah. But upon first viewing, I was kind of like, am I missing something? I don't.
Yes.
It felt kind of like awkward and weird and clunky. Because I don't know. That's the thing is you don't have to love a Miyazaki movie. You kind of feel like you should,
Mm-hmm.
but also, like I already said, stuff that's like heavy duty symbolic is not my favorite.
Mm.
Where it's like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna say that every time somebody.
Every time somebody types something.
Yeah, we shouldn't. Although we should just be done because I think I'm really tired.
I'm pretty tired.
Yeah,
I,
we're both like kind of.
I have work tomorrow. Well, I don't have work until later.
Bye, Liza. I think. Is that
Yeah,
Liza?
yeah, that's
I knew
Eliza.
that. I knew that was Liza. Bye. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for listening to us talk about random stuff. Just kidding, not random. Very focused.
Could be more focused.
Could be more focused. We could definitely
We're
like
figuring that out.
we could definitely like plan out what we're doing, but that's like an extra level of of work and effort on top.
Yeah, it would be nice though.
Yeah. No, I've been listening to just a like a philosophy podcast, and the guy very like clearly, it's like well planned out, and it's nice.
Mm-hmm.
It does make like,
It flows nicer.
yeah, but then again, it's not like a random conversation amongst friends. It's more like a lecture. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, this is kind of more just book club chat with friends
Yeah.
in a way. I guess before we go, what do we want to do next time?
Um. Uh.
Look at arts and crafts
We
houses.
could. I mean, we could honestly could just look at arts and crafts houses.
It's less of a thing to complain about and more just look at cool stuff.
Yeah, we could. I really like arts and crafts houses. Or we could. I feel like I had a list of things, but now my brain's like half shut down. Um, we could discuss a specific kind of art. We could. I got a whole bunch of books that are pretty great. We could do Nietzsche's Birth of Tragedy. Very interesting. Very like, that'd give us a lot to think about. Uh,
Yeah, I haven't read that, but I'm sure
it's really interesting.
the bit I have read of Nietzsche, he's gives you a lot to think about.
Yeah. Uh,
How long is that?
it's really short. It's probably like this, maybe even less. I'm trying to think, because there's a whole bunch of things I've. Again, I had like a.
Hmm.
We could. Oh my goodness. We should talk about Miyazaki. Talk about our favorite animes.
Becomes an anime
Yeah.
discussion thing.
Bro, I don't even like 99% of anime.
Me neither.
Uh, which could be something to talk about. We could talk about like animation something or other.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Hmm.
Just random. Just uh. 'Cause yeah, we both.
Eh.
I can't even like think straight. We can talk about Calvin and Hobbes for heaven's sakes.
I think either I do like doing book stuff.
Yeah, books like give us a lot.
Yeah, books are fun. Doing a book club thing, but also I like architecture stuff. So
Yeah.
either looking at arts and crafts or reading Birth of Tragedy would be good.
We could do arts and crafts in the meantime, cuz Birth of Tragedy is still like a lot.
I'd
It's just
imagine.
it's just I mean it's like this, like there's a lot in Birth of Tragedy.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's a pretty short book. Um though there's a guy who does who does who has a series on YouTube where he basically slowly talks through it and is really, 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 really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's like a lot to like listen to because the book is short and that thing's like 6 or 7 hours of I like slowly listened to it because it's definitely like this guy just taking his time and talking about it and
Mm-hmm.
just like going through and being like, well, here's like the context, like helping you understand all of like here's like Wagner, like what Nietzsche thought, right? Kind of like helping you go through it. Or we can just read it bare bones and just go through it. I don't know, it's just very interesting, very different from what we've talked about.
Mm-hmm.
It's essentially because the reason why that's kind of falls in the category of art stuff is he's not really like a philosopher yet. He
Mm-hmm.
was still being like a Greek
It's the
Greek studies guy.
classics
Yeah, and
guy.
he's essentially talking about like music and like why music rocks. It's
Mm-hmm.
essentially like a book on why music rocks. Um, so it's not like too heavy duty yet as far as like philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
It's more like a music appreciation and talking about how you need both like kind of like the wild like naturalness of music like the like how music kind of like comes out of us
Mm-hmm.
and then you need like the structure
Yeah. Hmm.
like how they're both important like the reckless like you can't just like the Dionysus like the reckless like abandon you need
Yeah.
like that's like tempered by the Apollo like the structure and like beauty
Mm-hmm.
it helps you like understand and like tame the I don't know should we do the houses first
Yeah.
like take some time to read it's not a story the Jedi would tell you.
uh,
Should we just talk about Star Wars? Just OG Star Wars and how much fun it is.
just, just, just New Hope.
Just New Hope.
Just like the first quarter of the movie. Let's talk about Tatooine.
Yeah.
Just do a frame by frame of that movie.
Just talk about how it was made. It's fun. That's it's how it was made of Star Wars is pretty fun.
Anyway,
Yeah.
well,
Okay.
this is enough now.
Yeah. I've been.
It's just Jason laughing. I have work in the morning.
Yeah.
So I need to sleep.
I have babies that are going to basically like I'm gonna go home
Not sleep.
and not sleep for the next like hour or so because this is right about when baby William wakes up and needs to be fed. I have to
Mm.
like I'm a bottle I make the bottle. What'd you
You're
say?
welcome. He's saying thanks, guys. This should be a lot easier to read this next time. I'll have a totally different setup.
We'll see.
Unless
Okay.
you steal all my Amazon packages.
Oh yeah, I could. Now that I know they're relevant to my goals in life. My goal is to have more better monitors. Okay. Bye bye.
Bye bye.